Okay, let us begin. So we are nearing the end of the Sikha, and it is the most incredible Sikha, as you're about to discover, because as much as you might have enjoyed it until now, and I hope you have, and as much as you may have found it insightful until now, but what's coming next is going to completely blow everybody's mind. It's really, really powerful stuff. So let's go back a step. Let's review what got us to this point, what started our conversation, how the conversation worked, what the key points were, what the key takeaways have been. And then if you remember last week, we left off with the promise that the Rebbe says he's going to explain the concept in a deeper level. That's where we're up to now. And this deeper level is what's completely mind-blowing. So let's go back. What happened? We have a quotation from the Rambam where in the laws of Chanuka, the Rambam suddenly goes what looks like off topic. And he says, what if you've got a situation that you can only afford either your Shabbos candles or your Chanukah candles, or for that matter, either your Shabbos candles or Kiddush wine? Which one takes priority? And he says, unequivocally, Shabbos candles take priority. Which is fine. I mean, that totally makes sense within the context of the laws of Chanukah, right? You've got a question, so Shabbos candles take precedence. It did, however, raise a question for us. Surely the better place to have discussed this would have been in the laws of Shabbos, because you're telling me how important Shabbos candles are. So why not discuss it in the laws of Shabbos? We also were curious how come it is that the Rambam goes into so much detail about why Shabbos candles are there to bring peace to the world. Look how important peace is because of the story of the Sota woman, where you take Hashem's name and you dissolve it in water in order to try and bring shalom bayis, peace between husband and wife, where there's a terrible conflict between them. And then he goes further to say, actually, peace is an incredible value and virtue, that the whole purpose of the whole Torah is to bring peace to the world. And we said, like, surely that's all overkill. You don't have to give me all that information. Just say very simply, Shabbos candles are on the theme of peace, which is very important, and therefore they take precedence over the over the Chanukah candles. We also wanted to know why he uses different expressions to what the Gemara does and why he divides the laws differently. So we had a whole series of questions. And effectively what we came to understand is this. We came to understand that the notion of one being displaced for the other, the Chanukah candles being pushed aside in order to accommodate the Shabbos candles, is not that the one is, so to speak, demoted. It's not like we throw out Chanukah candles because we have to choose one. But rather it's to say that in this particular context, the most appropriate way to celebrate Chanukah is by lighting Shabbos candles. Now that was a big shift for us. Okay, so initially we understood that it's a toss-up between Shabbos and Chanukah, and Shabbos wins. And it's really important for us to appreciate and to understand that that's not how it works, but rather that there's an overarching theme that runs right through all of the mitzvahs. That's why the Rambam made a big deal about it, that the whole Torah is designed to bring peace into the world. So that's the chapa over here. The chapa is that the message of the whole of Torah is peace, including Chanukah. The goal of Chanukah is to bring peace to the world. Therefore, if you have a scenario where you've got Shabbos versus Chanukah candles, we prioritize the Shabbos candles because they are more openly on the theme of peace, which is also the theme of Chanukah. So it doesn't undermine Chanukah. On the contrary, it expresses the message of Chanukah. Now, we also had a few other questions like, why does the Rambam say that the Shabbos candles are all because of peace in the home, where actually the purpose of Shabbos candles is to show honor to Shabbos and to bring pleasure to the Shabbos experience? And if anything, the concept of the peace is like a sidebar. It's a nice add-on that Shabbos happens to bring, that nobody's going to bump into the furniture and you'll be able to see your family and the food on your plate. So we said, yes, that's true. But a very important part of this whole concept is the concept that, the very important part of this whole concept is to understand that basically you could take all of Judaism, all of mitzvahs, and you could split them into two groups. And that will help us to understand the nature of not just the importance of peace, but the nature of the whole of Judaism. So there is a group of mitzvahs that are called positive, proactive mitzvahs, things that you are supposed to do. And they are all an expression of the first of the 10 commandments, I am Hashem your God. So because I'm Hashem your God, that's why you're doing these things. For example, Shabbos. That's why you keep Shabbos. The primary driver of Shabbos is to fulfill a positive commandment, which is to rest on the seventh day. Practically, it so happens that the only way you can fulfill this positive commandment is by restricting certain things that you normally would do. So you can't use electricity, or you can't bake and cook, or whatever the restrictions of Shabbos might be. But the overarching theme of Shabbos is it's about something that you do, and in order to do it, you have certain restrictions. That's going to filter into candles as well. What's the primary reason that you light Shabbos candles? To do something positive. Every positive mitzvah is designed to increase divine light in the world. That's why we do those mitzvahs. More and more revelation of Hashem in the world. When a person lights Shabbos candles, it's on a similar theme. It's in a similar vein. Why do you light Shabbos candles? Add more light to your Shabbos experience. That is honor for Shabbos, that adds pleasure to your Shabbos experience. So it's the same theme. Add something positive into the world. And yes, there might be a spin-off. What's the spin-off? That nobody will bump into the furniture. Shalom bias. It's a spin-off, but it's not the focus. Then there's another stream of mitzvahs, and those are the mitzvahs which are called negative, prohibitive mitzvahs. Don't do these things. Why don't you do these things? Because by not doing these things, you're able to expunge negative energy out of the world. Now, sometimes in order to fulfill a negative mitzvah, you actually have to do something proactive. But what we're distinguishing over here is between, is your motivation to add light to the world, then it's a positive mitzvah, or is your motivation to remove darkness from the world, in which case it's a negative mitzvah. Chanuka is motivated by the same motivation as negative mitzvahs, which is, let's get rid of the darkness from the world. Let's remove the bad energy of the Hellenists and their corrupted ideals, and their decrees against Judaism, and their fight against our dedication to Hashem. That's negative stuff. Let's push it away. So the theme of Chanukah is push away the darkness. When the world is going dark, do something about it. So now you've got to do something. Your motivation is to get rid of the dark, but the fact is, in order to fulfill it, you have to do something proactive. So you've got to light candles. So if those are the two themes, to understand that both of those themes achieve the purpose of shalom, of peace. One way that you achieve peace in the world is by radiating more holiness, but the primary way in which you generate peace in the world, and this is going to be very important information for what we'll learn today, the primary place, the primary forum within the world is in the forum of removing a threat, removing the darkness, removing the negative. Because logically we understand that peace really only has a place where there has been conflict. Had there been no conflict, we wouldn't feel the urgency of peace. So now, we've got a very interesting scenario. Very interesting scenario. What is that? You've got a conflict. A conflict between a man and wife. Terrible conflict. Such a bad breakdown in this relationship that he is absolutely convinced that she is no longer faithful to the marriage. She is absolutely convinced that he is no longer faithful to her because he's making such accusatory, defamatory statements. Terrible conflict. Now, what's the purpose of the Torah? The purpose of the whole of Judaism is to create shalom where there was conflict. The Torah was not given for any other primary purpose than to bring harmony and peace into the world. Here we've got it, Exhibit 8. Look, there is conflict in the world. Let's bring peace. But you would think that if peace is the resolution of conflict, which it usually is, then you would expect that the main way, and maybe even the only way, that you can ever generate shalom is only in a Chanuka style. Fight your enemies. get rid of decrees. But you wouldn't imagine that a big, vital part of how you create shalom in the world is by generating light. That's why the Rambam quoted the example of the Sota, because what happens in the case of the Sota, we write Hashem's name on a piece of parchment, and it's not just any name of Hashem, it's Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, it's the name that represents Hashem's essence. So we generate light into the world, incredible divine light, as we write this name. And yet, the only reason we wrote that name in the first place was in order that we could erase it, because that's what will bring the shalom, the peace. That's what the Rambam wanted to illustrate to us. He wanted to illustrate that even if it looks like the primary action that you're doing is an action of positivity, like Shabbos is primarily about something positive, to rest. And Shabbos candles are primarily about something positive, to bring honor to Shabbos. Even in a situation when your primary objective is to add peace to the world, it is possible that that is designed in a way to remove the negative, to remove the issues of shalom bayis, be they between the Sota family, be they the shalom bayis in a home that's going to be dark. So what have we seen? What we've seen is the reason that the Shabbos candles take priority over the Chanuka candles is because the whole objective of Torah is to bring peace into the world, and that bringing peace into the world is not only about tackling your demons, but it is also about generating positivity into the world, even if the sole purpose of that positivity is to get rid of something toxic. Now comes the part that the Rebbe is going to blow our minds. What we're going to learn now, if you've never encountered this kind of concept before, absolutely redefines Judaism, what we're about to learn. It is incredibly, incredibly powerful. So just to show you where we are, it's Ois Yud Aleph, that's over there, okay, Ois Yud Aleph, and that is the bottom of the second column. The Biur Bozeh Ba'oimek Yoser. We're now going to explain this concept at a deeper level, and deeper level means we're going to explain it outside of the immediate context of Chanuka and Shabbos, even though we're going to use those to illustrate the point, and we're going to apply it to the broader context of what the whole of Judaism is about. And in order to understand what the whole of Judaism is about, we need to understand what shalom really means. Because unfortunately, we are so habituated, because of circumstance, right? Because of the world that we live in, we are so sure that shalom actually means the alleviation of conflict, that we actually miss the real meaning of shalom. Der Mittes und Schleimus von Shalom ist nicht nur das, was es wird bottelt, die Hisnagdus von Zweiten und Severet Shalom. The ultimate goal of peace is not to neutralize your enemy. Now, in a modern context, most people will tell you that's exactly what peace is. And that's why in so many environments around the world, peace is actually the result of who's stronger. So, for example, if you think back to the Cold War, how did they keep an equilibrium between East and West throughout the Cold War? By scaring each other that I have more nuclear weapons than you. So if you attack me, I'll obliterate you from the face of the earth. So you had shalom. You had this technical peace in the world because nobody was physically attacking each other. Why? Because each side was able to neutralize the other. In fact, they even, you can see it, there's certain occasions where Israeli politicians came to see the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told them that Israel needs to be an incredibly powerful army, not chas v'shalom, to have to go out and kill people, but rather because when you're such a powerful army, it will neutralize your enemy. They'll be afraid to start up with you because they'll know that you're too strong. But real shalom is not about neutralizing your enemy. And before we go further in the Sikha, I wanted to share something that the Rebbe teaches in a different Sikha related to this week's parasha that speaks exactly to this theme. This week's parasha starts off with the words, Vayetze Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. Yaakov left Be'er Sheva, which is a beautiful part of Israel. Not only is it physically, it's the Negev, so it's not the most gorgeous part of the land, unless you like that kind of landscape. But more importantly, it was a spiritually very wholesome place. And where did Yaakov go? Vayelech Harana. He goes to a place called Haran. Now, the simple reading is, why did he go? Why did he leave? Because he had a brother who wanted to kill him, as we saw at the end of last week's parasha. Right? After Yaakov gets the brochas, Esav completely blows a gasket, and he says, what's going on over here? This is the second time that my brother has managed to usurp my powers and what's coming to me. And it says clearly that he planned one day when Yitzchak passes away, he's going to take Yaakov, is going to kill him. So Yaakov runs away. And the cover story is that Rivka says he needs a shidduch, and the best place to find a shidduch is within the family, so he's got to go. But the Sifri gives a different explanation. Fascinating. The Sifri says, Vayetze Yaakov Be'er Sheva. If you remember, how did Be'er Sheva get its name? It was also in last week's parasha. It got its name because there was this running conflict between Yitzchak and Avimelech, the king of the Philistines. And actually, that conflict had started earlier between Avraham and Avimelech. And eventually it was settled in Be'er Sheva. A lot of the conflict had to do with water resources. And so they dug this well in Be'er Sheva, and Sham Nishba'u Sheneim. They made a covenant, and they made a peace treaty, and there was Shalom. So Be'er Sheva is a place of Shalom. What kind of Shalom? The kind of Shalom where you take the sting out of the tail of your enemy by making a peace agreement with it. Says the Sifri, Yaakov ran away from Be'er Sheva because he did not want to have to land up making such a peace deal with Avimelech, the king of the Plishtim. Why not? So the Sifri continues, because after Avraham Avinu made such a deal with Avimelech, that caused a delay of the Jewish people, the children of Avraham, who had been promised the land of Israel. There was a delay of 7 generations before they'd be allowed to come in. When Yitzchak made a subsequent deal with Avimelech, he delayed the process another generation. And so Yaakov did not want to delay the Jewish return to Israel an additional generation, so therefore he refused to make peace with the Plishtim. Instead, he ran away to Haran. That's what the Sifri says. The Rebbe has a series of questions about it, but the most logical question is, something doesn't add up over here, because Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were all equally prophetic, so they must have known, Avraham and Yitzchak must have known that if they're going to make this deal with Avimelech, it's going to affect their children coming into Israel. So how come they were comfortable to make the peace agreement and Yaakov was not comfortable? What's the big difference between Yaakov and his father and grandfather? That they went ahead with a particular approach and he outright refused to follow that approach. And so what the Rebbe says is absolutely fascinating. He says, if you have a look, there's a big difference between the approach Avraham and Yitzchak took and the approach that Yaakov took to their enemies. Avraham and Yitzchak took an approach, and when I say enemies in inverted commas, that's because their enemies also unfortunately included their own children. Avraham had a son who went off the rails, and Yitzchak had a son who went off the rails. And what's really interesting about it is that both Avraham and Yitzchak, anytime that they had to engage with those who were their enemies, they cut them some slack. So Avraham Avinu didn't want Yishmael to have to leave his house. He really wanted him to do teshuvah, and he wanted him to be exposed to all the right things, and he wanted him to turn out okay, and he davened on his behalf. Even the people of Sodom and Amorah, who Hashem had condemned to death, Avraham wanted to find a way. Surely there's a way. There's got to be a way. Yitzchak, who was far less magnanimous in that regard, still, when it came to Yitzchak, he wanted to give Esav the brachas. So it's really interesting that you see Avraham and Yitzchak took an approach which says enemies are a fact of life. We're not all homogeneous. We're not all connected to how Hashem wants us to live. It's not a world of goodness in its nature, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. It's a world that it's Malei Klippos v'Sitra Achra. It's filled with all the dark forces of the world, and Arashayim Goivrim boy. It's where the wicked have the upper hand. Avraham and Yitzchak were willing to acknowledge that that's the reality. And therefore, what you need to do is you need to manage that reality. So you create systems that neutralize the potency of your enemies so that they might well be Rishayim. As long as they don't interfere in your service of Hashem, everything's okay. So let's send Yishmael away. Yishmael will remain Yishmael, and he will spawn little Yishmaels who will cause horrible things for the Jewish people, but at least he doesn't interfere with me now, and I can serve Hashem now undisturbed. Yitzchak says, let's bless Esav. What will happen when we bless Esav? Esav will stay out of our hair. We'll be able to do what we need to do as Jewish people. Esav won't disturb us. He'll go, he'll live on his sword, as the Torah says, and that's it. Their entire attitude was, the world is designed to have negative within it, and we are designed, or we are expected, to protect ourselves from that negative. So part of the negative includes a group called the Plishtim, the Philistines. They represent a particular kind of negative energy in the world. The Alter Rebbe explains it in great detail. Plishtim represent the concept Movayam Afulosh, which basically means that they have no boundaries, like anything goes. Effectively, I suppose what we'd call today the far liberal approach. Anything is acceptable. And so both Avraham and Yitzchak say, Avimelech is a fact of life. The best way to handle him is you make a peace treaty that sets out rules. You stay on your side, I'll stay on my side. You don't bother me, I don't bother you, and I can serve Hashem in peace. Yaakov Avinu has a completely different approach because of his stage in history. In other words, he had the benefit of Avraham and Yitzchak's input. They laid the groundwork, and now Yaakov Avinu was able to take the whole approach of Yiddishkeit to the next level. What's the next level? The next level is you go to Haran. Not like Avraham, who went to Mitzrayim. Now, Mitzrayim is a bad place. I mean, Egypt is a bad place. But Haran is called Charoin Afshal Makom Ba'olam, the worst place in the world from a spiritual perspective at that time. And Yaakov's approach is, I'm not going to go to Haran and just satisfy myself with the fact that there is a Haran, and it's just unfortunate. So I better build a spiritual fortress to make sure that my family is not harmed. Yaakov walks into Haran with an attitude that says, I'm going to take this place and turn it around. I'm going to take all the wealth of Haran and own it, which really represents the concept of taking what was once totally materialistic and antithetical to Hashem's purpose, and I'm going to align it with Hashem's purpose. And in order to do that, I might have to play the game a little bit, and I might have to adopt some of the practices of Lavan, and, you know, he cheats me. I might have to do things that appear like I'm cheating him. But whatever it takes, I'm not going to accept the reality. I'm going to transform the reality. So because that's Yaakov's approach, he says, I can't hang around where there's still the prospect of a peace treaty with Avimelech, because a peace treaty with Avimelech means basically that I acknowledge that Avimelech has a position. And I don't want to acknowledge Avimelech has a position. I want to say that the world out there, there's only one position to have, and that's God's position. You don't want to play ball? I'm out of here. I'm going to go to a place that can be transformed. So that is exactly what we're going to learn here. Let's go back to the beginning of this paragraph. Der Mitzvus und Schleimus von Shalom ist nicht nur das, was es verbottelt, die Snagdus von Zweiten und Severt Shalom. The real definition of peace is not just to cancel your animosity, Mr. Avimelech. Now you're not going to be belligerent anymore, and I'm going to be happy. That's not real Shalom. The history of the world will tell you that any time people negotiated that kind of compromised peace, which says, I won't hurt you as long as you don't hurt me, they could never last indefinitely. So what is the ultimate goal of Shalom? Nor as es wird am Matzev, wenn es ist iboif niton nit shayech kein Metzias von am Menaged. Real Shalom is where there is no capacity for an enemy. Let's put it this way. In South Africa, there are a lot of people who tell you, I live in Shalom. I live in a gated community. We have security patrols. We have CCTVs. We have number plate recognition. We have cap, ahin, aher, all that stuff. I live in Shalom. It's not true. I don't live in Shalom. We live in some degree of peace of mind. But it's not Shalom. Why? Because what if you have to go to another part of the country that's not in your gated area? and they don't have CAP, and they don't have CCTVs, and they don't have whatever. In other words, the enemy still exists. As long as the enemy exists, somewhere inside of myself, there's a lack of shalom. Real shalom would be to rehabilitate the enemy. Real shalom is that, as he says, it's not shayach, it's not possible for there to be this animosity or this nemesis. How do you do that? Look what he says. Das heißt, als es wird nicht galle, als dem zweitens Metzies ist nicht menaget, over Shleimus Yoiser, nicht anders von sein Metzies. What is real shalom? Well, let's put it this way. What is the source of all conflict? The source of all conflict is the sense of difference. So what's the source of all shalom? The sense of oneness. You may have seen, because it was doing the rounds a couple of weeks ago, there was a clip where the mayor at the time, David Dinkins, who was the mayor of New York in the 90s, and there was those terrible riots in Crown Heights, race riots in Crown Heights, and it was a terrible period. And Dinkins didn't manage it well at all. But of course, he had to play the political cards. He came to the Rebbe. And when he came past the Rebbe, he said to the Rebbe, we have to do whatever we can to ensure peace, blah, 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 blah. And then he made a statement, something along the lines of, and people have to take responsibilities on both sides. I think that was the expression. But whatever it was, he said on both sides. And the Rebbe corrected him. The Rebbe said, as the leader of this city, it's imperative that you recognize that we're all on the same side. All conflict emerges and emanates from a sense of difference. And all shalom is the humility of acceptance of sameness. It's very interesting. Earlier this year, when the pandemic really was raging and nobody knew what was going on and how to handle it, and the whole world was shut down. So suddenly people started to realize, there's an element of oneness. Doesn't matter how wealthy a person is, doesn't matter how intelligent a person is. Everybody was equally vulnerable for a period of time. Now, perhaps it's changed, and you could say that there's systems in place and people believe that they're safer in certain places than other places, but there was a time of oneness, and it was fascinating to see how in the whole world conflict reduced dramatically. It was messianic. It was a time where you had collaboration in the Middle East between countries that were previously at war with each other, and even within countries, factions that were at war with each other that had no option but to collaborate, because otherwise everybody would be exposed. So it's a negative way to illustrate the fact that there's a fundamental oneness, human and human, citizen of planet Earth and citizen of planet Earth. Except that obviously that kind of thing is a little bit fabricated, because, when you start to say we're all people and we're all the same, well, we know that that's not the case. We know that some people are more intelligent, some people are more successful, some people are more wealthy. And it's not so simple. Not everybody speaks the same language, not everybody has the same culture. So let's take it a step deeper. Das ist der primistische Pirish in dem, was HaTorah nicht nelasse Shalom ba'olam. We'll now explore the deepest meaning of the phrase that says the Torah was only given to bring peace to the world, not to referee conflict, not to create compromise between people because we acknowledge that there's a higher purpose and a higher goal, and therefore we have no choice. So we have to beat our swords into plowshares because we have to acknowledge that Hashem is in charge. But rather as the emesem etzius von Welt is Torah elekus. What does it mean when it says the Torah comes to illustrate or to bring peace to the world? Not by explaining why peace is important and illustrating how much we benefit if we all work together and how the group can carry more than the sum of the parts. It's a total mind shift. What is the world? An expression of Torah. What is the world? Godliness. This is a fundamental shift. Which means, now here's the part, this next part of the paragraph, this is the major mind shift that the Rebbe wants us to recognize. Niet not der Farboselikus kol sibasi sabusoi bikiyumai. Vidal Terebis, Mavoy Barichas as Debish of Ashafti Welt ständig bechol rega mi'ayin liyesh. When we say over here that the purpose of Torah is to bring peace to the world, it's not by illustrating to us that the world is completely reliant on Hashem at every given moment. The Alter Rebbe explains this in great detail in Tanya. And effectively, when you go and you learn Tanya, this is what you come to understand. And we do need to do this. So I know that's we're like right at the end of the paragraph, and why don't you just finish the sentence? But in order to really appreciate what the Rebbe is telling us over here, and what an incredible insight it is, let's just pause for a moment and see what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. So let's say, for argument's sake, let's say that you were walking in a park, and the next thing, a golf ball flew right past you, really close, almost chas v'shalom hit you. But let's say that it didn't just fly past. Let's say that at the time that this golf ball happened to fly past, you happened at exactly that time to be taking a picture of the scenery. And now you look at the picture because, that's how we do it these days. Once upon a time, you'd have to wait till it was developed. Now you just look at the screen. And you didn't even realize that there was a golf ball flying past. But now that you look at the picture, you see the landscape with a golf ball in midair. So you then share that picture of the golf ball in midair. You now share it with whoever, your family. So one of the family members opens this picture and sees a golf ball flying through the air. And this particular individual doesn't necessarily know much about how things work. And this person sends back a message to say, wow, I never realized that golf balls fly. Don't know much about how the world works. I know there's such a thing as a golf ball. I never realized that golf balls fly. So, of course, you could get a good chuckle out of that because golf balls don't fly, obviously. So why is this golf ball flying? I see just this picture, right? I just see one frame of reality. And in this frame of reality that I am able to see, it looks like golf balls fly. But if I know what happens beyond that frame, either because I saw it or because I understand it intellectually, then I appreciate that the natural state of a golf ball is to be on the ground and not moving. How does this golf ball fly? Because there's something called a golf club. And there's something called a golfer who holds the golf club. And when the golfer swings his club, well, enough force, that force is then transferred from the movement and the actual velocity of the club. That energy is transferred to the ball, and it makes the ball fly through the air. And you know how long that golf ball is going to fly through the air? Only as long as the force of that golf club, powered by the person's golf swing, only as long as that force is stronger than the force of gravity, that's how long the ball is going to fly through the air. So now, when I look at the golf ball, my perception of the golf ball, if I don't know any better, and especially if I just see that little picture, is that the golf ball somehow is capable of independent flight. And so you could live your life thinking that you're attacked by golf balls. You could live your life, if you happen to live near a golf course and you don't understand how the thing works, you could believe that the golf balls have a vendetta against you. And that's why they keep flying into your garden. And that's why they keep smashing your windows. And that's why they bump you on the head. Because golf balls have a thing against you. And now you hate golf balls. Because as far as you're concerned, they're a menace. Golf balls are terrorists. But of course, anybody who understands things a little bit differently will appreciate two things. Number one, golf balls don't fly. And number two, the reason the golf ball's in your garden is not malicious. It's because people are bad at golf. And now you go out there and you finally have this epiphany and you recognize that golf balls don't fly on their own. And you go, because another golf ball has landed in your swimming pool. So you go out there and there's a guy with the guy. Did you see my ball? And you're ready to clobber him. And then you actually realize this is a human. And the guy apologizes and he says, my game is really bad and I really apologize. I hope I didn't do any damage and I'll pay you if I did. And suddenly everything changes because you see what is behind the scenes. Says the Alter Rebbe, when we look at the world, we see a frame. We're seeing a snapshot of reality. And we are mighty arrogant if we don't recognize that that's the case. Because realistically, when we look at the world, we don't see, forget about where the world came from. Forget about where the world is going. We look up at the sky and we're unable to see the trillions of entities that live out there. We're unable to see the millions of galaxies. We're blind to it, whether it be daytime or nighttime. So at night we look out, we see a bunch of stars. We have no clue that some of those stars are full constellations, full galaxies. We're completely blind to what's going on. And that's just what's in the snapshot. So we look around and we think there is a world. Golf balls fly. There is a world. And the world has rules. The rule of golf balls is they fly. And the rules of the world are that there are cycles of economy, and there are natural disasters, and there are times that there are pandemics, and people behave in a certain way. And that's how we see it, because we're looking at a snapshot. And as far as we're concerned, there are these different mechanisms working inside the world at any given time, and some of them are my enemy. Some of those golf balls fly through my window. Some of the laws of nature really annoy me, or some of the things of the world completely contradict why I believe or why I've been taught that I'm here. So there's conflict. I would have liked to have come to the shir today, but I didn't sleep enough last night. Conflict. I would have liked to have come to the shir today, but I don't really appreciate the Zoom environment. Like, I could learn better if it was one-on-one, if it was in person. I would have liked to have davened this morning, but I was so hungry I needed to eat breakfast, and then I ran out of time and I didn't daven. Conflict. The world is constantly in conflict for us, because what are we seeing? A snapshot. And in that snapshot, we perceive that the world behaves according to a set of rules, and those rules are not always accommodating of the spiritual endeavors that we are trying to fulfill. Says the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, golf balls don't fly. If you see a flying golf ball, then you need to know that there is something that made the golf ball fly. If you see a world that has a particular operating system, you need to know that there's an operator of that system. And you need to know that that operator has to be working at every single moment, because the golf ball will only fly as long as the force of my shot is strong enough to keep it flying. Because without my force, golf balls sit on the ground and they don't move. And by the same token, the world, the only reason that there is a world, and the only reason that all of these different mechanisms happen within the world, is only because there's an operator right now, currently making it all happen. Because if there was nobody making it happen, it should not exist. And it's a very simple, logical reason why it should not exist. Because anything that has a beginning has an end. Anything that starts at a particular point in time is guaranteed not to last forever. In scientific terms, we call this the law of entropy. Anything that exists deteriorates if left to its own devices. The world should consistently get weaker. The systems should get weaker. The orbits of the planets should slow with time. The cycles of nature should diminish. There should be less rain, less heat. The fact that the world continues and continues, the Rambam writes this, the fact that the world continues in an infinite loop, in other words, it doesn't show any signs of diminishing its natural powers, is because there's an operator. So the Alter Rebbe teaches us in Tanya, and it's a huge revolution of perspective, teaches us in Tanya, the world is not adrift, the world is not separate, the world is not far from God, the world is powered by God. Now, logically, let's think about it. Logically, we're talking about conflict versus shalom. Logically, does it make any sense that Hashem would constantly power a world that defeats the purpose for which he created it? Does that make sense? You know, I think that there are all these factors in my life that interfere with me being able to achieve what Hashem wants. But the minute I recognize that Hashem is currently making those things exist, it's no longer logical to say that there are things in my life that make me not be able to do what Hashem wants. There's conflict. No, the Torah is nitna la'aseh shalom ba'olam. The awareness and consciousness and insight of the Torah is to help me consolidate, harmonize, come to peace with the fact that if Hashem puts things into the world right now that I feel are challenges, that I feel are impassable obstacles, rather than to come to the conclusion that those are insurmountable, I need to come to the conclusion that Hashem has obviously empowered me more than I thought. Because it's unthinkable that he would deliberately, continuously create things that stymie the purpose for which the world was created. So Torah nitna la'aseh shalom ba'olam. The Torah was created to bring peace to the world. At that level, the level as we learn it in Tanya, what does it mean, bring peace in the world? To bring us to a sense of consolidating and reconciling what happens in our lives and what the Torah expects of us, that they're not at loggerheads. That whenever it feels like there's a terrible conflict between them, it's our perception, it's not our reality. Why? Because the controller wouldn't design the system to be impossible to succeed. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. So to summarize, the Alter Rebbe's perspective on the shalom ba'olam, the peace, the harmonious perspective on life that Torah gives us, is that we know that Hashem is, so to speak, behind the system, running the system. What the Rebbe is going to teach us now, even though it is a concept that is expressed in other places in Chassidus, so it's not brand new information, but what he's going to teach us now is a completely different level of shalom. So this is now the second last line of this paragraph. Noval de etzem mitzius von yesh hanivra is the yesh ho'amiti. You'll have a look at the bottom, note number 51. He traces this back already to the Mitta, the Rebbe, the second Rebbe, who already introduces this concept. It's a concept that the Rebbe speaks about arguably more frequently than any of the other Rebbes. What does he say over here? The etzem mitzius von yesh hanivra is the yesh ha'amiti. It's a powerful concept. Let's break it apart into bite-sized pieces. First of all, we have to know that there are two words that are used frequently throughout mystical teachings in Judaism, and those are the words yesh and ayin. Direct translation, yesh, there is. Ayin, there is not. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, in his interpretation of the Torah right at the beginning, Bereshis bara, in the beginning Hashem created. So the Ramban explains to us that the definition of the term create is to make yesh out of ayin. To make something out of nothing. Yesh, there is, from ayin, where there was not. We're not capable of that. Humans are incapable of creation. Humans are only capable of modifying creation. So we get raw materials and we take those raw materials and we fashion them into other things. But Hashem is capable of taking absolute nothing and out of the absolute nothing generating yesh, something which is solid, something which is real, something which is tangible. In fact, even in modern Hebrew, like in English, we would say yes. So in Hebrew, they say yesh. Like a guy scores a goal, yesh. It means you've achieved something. Now, yesh also has a certain undertone to it. It's the undertone of self-awareness. So we can refer to a person, we can say the person is a yesh. And that wouldn't be a complimentary description, because that means that they are very conscious of themselves. In Chassidus, you often hear people use the expression, they say, don't be such a yesh, which effectively means don't be so full of yourself. Don't take yourself so seriously. Don't occupy so much space, if nowhere else in your own mind. So the question is this. When we say yesh mi'ayin, that Hashem created something from nothing, it gives a little bit of a misleading concept, a little bit of a misleading perception, because it sounds like the world is real, it's yesh, And before there was a world, there was ayin, there was nothing. Right? Makes it sound like the world is something very substantial and very important. And prior to the world, there was nothing, like nothing of value. The truth of the matter is that a better way to say it would be yesh ayin yesh. That would be a far more accurate description of the creative process. Why? Yesh means that something is. So the most appropriate, in fact, the only appropriate usage of the word yesh would be to refer to Hashem, because Hashem is the only thing that truly is. Right? Why is Hashem the only thing that truly is? Because Hashem is at any time, past, present, future. Hashem is in every place. And most importantly, Hashem is always in the same state. Everything else that exists changes state, from youth to maturity to old age to decline, from growth to reproduction to the decline of the cell. So everything that we know is not yesh. How it is now is not how it was yesterday or how it will be tomorrow. So the truest form of the word yesh refers to Hashem. We call that yesh ha'amiti, the true yesh, the genuine yesh. The only time you can be honest in using the word yesh, he is. Hashem really is. He is in full, unlimited, bli gvul, infinite capacity at all times and all places. But in order to create the world, Hashem, and only Hashem could do this because he's kol yochel, because he is all capable. So in order to create the world, what does Hashem do? Ayin. He creates a vacuum where, as far as the human mind, or for that matter, any mind could perceive, there's actually nothing. Now, of course, it's an illusion because there's never nothing, because there's only Hashem. It's just Hashem cannot be detected. So we call that ayin. And the reason that that's important is because obviously if we'd be aware of the fact that Hashem is the only yesh, obviously I can't exist because only Hashem is true. So Hashem disguises himself and hides himself and camouflages himself in this incredible reality called ayin. Now that it is possible to believe that Hashem might not be in a particular place, it's not true, it's just a perception, but he created that perception. Out of that space where Hashem is invisible, he creates yesh me'ayin. He creates another reality, which is ours. And that is called yesh hanivra. The existence that has been created with a built-in mindset that says, I am real. I mean, do you ever get up in the morning and think, maybe I'm not real? Do we question our own existence? Maybe when really bad things, God forbid, happen in life, a person pinches themselves, am I dreaming? Or when something really good happens. But generally speaking, we don't doubt ourselves. Stub your toe, you know that you're real. So that's called yesh hanivra. Hashem, in his incredibly unlimited capacity to do anything, is capable of creating us to feel real. So yesh amiti, the truth of what is real is Hashem. Yesh hanivra, what feels real is us and our environment. And they are in conflict. Because when I open up the Torah, then I recognize only Hashem is real. And everything else is nonsense. Everything else is distraction. And then I close the Torah. And my hunger is real. My fatigue is real. My stress is real. My desires are real. My dreams are real. My bills are real. So in our perception, the yesh hanivra and the yesh amiti are absolute conflict. If Hashem is real, my problems are not real. If Hashem is real, my needs are not so important. If Hashem is real, my ego is not real. But considering that I feel my ego is real and my problems are real and my aspirations are real, so is Hashem really real? These are nice theoretical, abstract concepts. Eye in the sky looks after us kind of from a distance. But he's not yesh, he's not the only entity that is real. So typically they're in conflict. All of spiritual difficulty comes from that conflict. Comes along the Torah and says, stop looking at the world in a binary fashion. Either Hashem is real or the world is real. And recognize that the yesh hanivra, in its essence, is the yesh ha'amiti. There is no conflict. It's not me versus God. It's not the world versus God. It's that Hashem is within the essence of why there is a world. Or to put it into different words, how can I possibly have the sense that I am so real if actually the only thing that exists is Hashem? How can I have the sense of ego, or worse, even the possibility for arrogance, which means I really, really think I'm that important, if actually in truth the only thing that's real is Hashem? Why am I capable of this really compelling sense of self? Because I am actually plugged in to the real Yesh. I'm plugged into Hashem, who is real. So if I'm not conscious, if I don't have a developed perspective on the world, then I only feel the sense of self, and I don't recognize that the sense of myself is just evidence to the fact that I'm plugged into the real existence. Comes along the Torah, make shalom. Don't make shalom to say, let's negotiate between your soul and your body. Let's negotiate between the expectations of Torah and the pull and push of this world. Let's negotiate between the things that the Torah expects of you and the things you wish for yourself. The Torah comes to make peace in the world. The ultimate peace is to say, there is no enemy. You think that your body is your enemy. You think that the world is your enemy. You think that temptations are real. Let me explain to you, says the Torah. You are plugged into the mainframe. The world is plugged into the mainframe. You're just looking at the outside screen. But if you learn enough Torah, you'll see that it is a screen. And then you'll recognize the world is connected to Hashem's essence, and you're connected to Hashem's essence, and there is no conflict. That's the ultimate state of shalom. Now, we're not finished with this, obviously, as you can tell. There's still a fair amount to do to unpack this concept. It is an incredibly powerful concept. And it's, I think, arguably one of the most life-changing concepts that a person can ever learn. So, in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll continue it next week and hopefully finish unpacking it and come to understand exactly how this relates back to Chanuka and to Shabbos. And by extension, there's a nice take-home message that Rebbe is going to give us. I think, please God, we should.
Thank you.
Pleasure.